welcome everyone to another Conversations in the Void. I'm your host, Graveyard, joined, as always, with my off-screen producer, Salem. Make sure to say hi to Salem in chat. He's there, listening, watching, but never seen. Only heard sometimes. All right, our next guest for tonight. I had the privilege of talking to this gentleman over at Distance Learning a couple weeks ago, but he is here on our show. He's a vet and writer with works including the Unholy Slaying Agency. I'm in the middle of this book, and I am loving it. Please welcome to the Void, Guy Quintero. How you doing tonight?
Hey, how's everybody doing? I'm doing great, thank you.
Awesome. I still have the spooky background from last time. I like it.
Oh, yes, sir. Morehouse Asylum. And you know what that means now, right? Because
yeah, I'm excited. I was able to talk to other people that do ghost hunting and stuff like that, and I was invited to Maine to do one a couple weeks ago. I'm like, oh, I kind of want to a lot. I'm not gonna lie.
Did you guys find anything good, or
no? I didn't go. I did not have a chance.
You didn't go. Okay,
no. But I have a standing invitation, and we, like I said, guest in May. He's like, you should come do it. I'm like, man, I will hit you up one day when I'm there.
You should, though. Hey, that'd be awesome.
Yeah. So before we get in kind of the meat potato, I got to gauge people's horror levelness here. So what was your first horror movie? Do you recall?
Oh, let me think. I've been watching them since I was little. Mm-hmm. So my parents, I guess it's a double-edged sword, right? My parents really didn't have much of a filter. Like they were like, yeah, just we'll let this little kid watch Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Mm-hmm. So yeah, or Faces of Death.
Yeah.
So I had it. I had all those movies. The one I could recall the most would likely be Faces of Death. Faces of Death. When the scene that stands out the most to me when they put the monkey in the middle of the table and started beating it to death with little hammers. Then they split its skull open like Indiana Jones. But this wasn't fake. This was real. This wasn't just ice cream inside of a bowl that was supposed to look like a monkey. I mean, they were actually scooping out the brains and eating it up. And I remember thinking, okay. And there's something about seeing special effects. There's some really good special effects artists out there. But when you see it for real, that there's something surreal about it. And you're like, this registers a little different. This hits a little harder because that, they're not eating strawberry ice cream.
Right. That's a heck of a first one, quite honestly.
Faces of Death, everyone. If you haven't seen that, don't let the kiddos watch that. And it's not something for people who are squeamish, because it's actually more of a documentary movie than an actual work of fiction. So
yeah. I don't. My wife will never watch those. I watched them all just because I was morbidly curious as a teenager. So, and they're supposed to be bringing it back, I guess, in some capacity they talked about. Yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah. I don't know. I think it's going to be more, though. The idea is going to be it's more of a pretty much a found footage or just different art style to showcase practical effects. It's not going to be real.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. That would make more sense, because I would find it hard for them to redo something like that this day and age. I mean, the 70s, there wasn't much of a filter. In the 70s, it was just, there was gore and violence and sex and all that good stuff without too much of a filter. And nowadays there's kind of an unwritten rule where you only take it to a certain limit. You don't go any further.
Yeah. And that's what's weird. Because I was joking about with my co-host, like, our kids' horror movies growing up were Poltergeist and Wizard of Return to Oz is a horrific kids movie, and people died in our stuff, but like my kids' horror movies were like Monster House, the animated cartoon that was just no one died. It was just it hits differently now, I think.
Yeah.
But kind of along that line, so Guy, in your opinion, what is the most overrated horror thing? Whether it's singular movie, franchise, you just go, I don't understand how this is, let's say, a $2 billion franchise.
Oh, that's a good question. That's a really good question. I'm gonna have to go with, and this is gonna upset a lot of people.
It's okay, safe space.
Ready?
Yeah.
The Scream franchise.
Ooh.
I think it's after a while they become a little predictable. Now, no, don't get me wrong.
Mm-hmm.
I'll watch me some Scream, but I think that as far as horror goes, it's a little overrated.
That's fair. Like I said, like I said, this is like here's people's takes, hot takes. I said my hot take and my co-host's hot take is the Conjuring universe isn't good in our opinions.
Oh, okay. That's a fair assessment. That is a fair assessment.
And anything after Exorcist 1 of the Exorcist franchise, not good.
Yeah, part 2 was weird. I was pretty far
Yeah.
out.
Yeah. I mean, maybe because I wasn't on drugs when I watched it, it didn't have the same effect. I don't know. We watched it recently and it was just not good. And the
Went
ones
off
after
the
that,
rails.
yeah.
Yeah.
So Insidious is James wants trash. I agree, Carl. All right. So then, Guy, on the other side, what is the most underrated horror movie or comic or TV show that you just go, whoa, 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 you haven't seen this? I'm sitting you down right now. I'm gonna watch you watch it.
Oh, wow. Okay. Underrated.
Mm-hmm.
The Descent.
Ooh, part 1 or part 2?
Part 1. Part 1. They were both good. They were both very
Mm-hmm.
good. I think part 1 just it hits really hard, especially because caving is like, I'm not a very claustrophobic person. I've done a
Mm-hmm.
lot of dangerous things in my life, but caving is just something I would absolutely not do. And so
Yeah.
to immerse your audience into that area, and then after that, throw in some blind, ravenous cannibals.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a really good mix of horror, and especially when she gets trapped,
Yeah.
and you can. And I had my date with me when we watched it, and she was just hyperventilating, losing it. Poor girl.
Well,
So,
that means atmospherically it did an amazing job then for her.
oh yeah, and it's multiple aspects of horror because you're dealing with monsters, but you're also dealing with the atmosphere, like you said. But you're also dealing with jaded friendships. Can you trust this person? Right?
No,
Because
yeah. Spoilers are no.
yeah.
You cannot. Yeah. Now, do you adhere to the, because we all know the Set 2 came out, right? And then do you adhere to the original UK ending where she doesn't make it out, or do you adhere to the USA ending where she does make it out?
I see. I think that she doesn't make it out, and the reason why is because now this gives the writers a chance for a third movie,
Mm-hmm.
and in this third movie now we have a fresh group that goes down there. Maybe they take another route into the mountain, and now we have a whole new horror movie that
Mm-hmm.
we can come up with, and maybe there's another type of monster down there. Who knows? I mean, it's just a whole nother world down there.
Right.
Who knows what they run into down there? Who knows who gets trapped and ends up upside down and while caving and then ends up suffocating, choking on
Right.
their own saliva.
Yeah. I like that. I like that idea. We had in front of the show, he does independent found footage horror movies, and he is a caver, like legit spelunker, and he made a horror movie in a cave that was found footage. That was just him.
Oh wow.
And like he's crawling through those spaces. He's like shoving his body through those just narrow ass spaces. I'm just going, dude, I don't know how you do that. Like I think I would love to do it, but until I have to get like tiny bit stuck, I think I'd panic and freak out.
Yeah, me too. And I went down a rabbit hole with this whole thing after watching Descent. I was watching documentaries on YouTube, and one of the cavers, he ended up sliding down too far
Mm-hmm.
and ended up breaking his back. He crashed head first, and ended up breaking his back, like his upper
Oh.
back. It was crazy, and he just couldn't move. They had to pull him out, and by the time they brought him out, of course he was gone. But there's so many deaths like that, and it's just terrifying. And the thing was, when he was there, Like, he broke his back, but he was still alive. They could still hear him, whimpering, screaming. And that's about all he could do.
Yeah.
And he just, day and a half later, couldn't make it, died.
Yeah. And that's sucks. Like, that caving, not for me. Like, going to Mammoth Cave in Kentucky, love Mammoth Cave. It's big, wide open space. I don't know if you ever been to it, but it's awesome, and it's so vast. And Expedition X or Josh Gates did like a paranormal research in Mammoth Cave before.
I saw that. I love Josh Gates. He's awesome.
And I'm just going like, man, I would love that. I would absolutely love to do that, because the idea of just being like camping in the pitch black with no lights, nothing, is perfect for me. I think I would sleep like a baby.
That's hardcore. That's hardcore. I've done it before, and I'm gonna tell you, I was terrified. So, I was terrified. Oh yeah. Out in Iraq, we were doing stakeouts, and I'm telling you, it's when the lights go out and you're not allowed to use any light, it is terrifying. It's terrifying.
Yeah,
even with nods.
Really?
Huh. Yeah.
I went camping in Boy Scouts to Eagle Cave. I was probably like 12 or 13, and in Wisconsin in February. The high of that weekend was 0. And we slept in the cave. Yeah. And I loved it. I absolutely loved it.
Oh, you're crazy.
I mean, yeah, that's very, very true. I am definitely crazy. But let's.
I wish I was still that hardcore. I apologize.
Oh, no worries. Let's get into you and this book, especially. I said, I'm reading A Whisper in the Dark. So, how did you get into writing? Was it something you always enjoyed, or I know your inspirations are Tom Clancy? See if they help inspire you to start writing then.
Well, that's part of it. It's a multifaceted thing. My friends I grew up with, we did a lot of role playing as well. So it's a combination of those things. We did a lot of role playing games, Dungeons and Dragons, Shadowrun, things like that. So we ended up making up our own games, and this is where the Unholy Slaying Agency came from. I made up it was originally a dice game, that dice and imagination, and that's how we used to entertain ourselves. We didn't really have access to the fancy video games that kids have today. This was back in the day, a long time ago. So I think that the best we had was the NES 1, and maybe the Super Nintendo was just starting to come out. So we were just a bunch of bored young guys trying to figure out what we would do to pass the time, and eventually storytelling became the thing to do. And that's how this kind of shaped my passion for storytelling. So when you're an author, you start to discover that there's a difference between storytelling and writing. There's some people might have amazing imaginations, but they don't know how to convey the message properly by putting it into words. So you have to learn both. And so learning the craft of writing became another journey, because then I had a lot of wonderful teachers. Shout out to Sally. And a lot of wonderful people in my corner. Shout out to Carl and my cousin Katie. Thank you so much for always just being there to coach you and help you out, because we get lost sometimes as authors, and sometimes we forget about the reader's perspective. So there's a lot of important factors that ended up culminating in me becoming a writer. But my first manuscript was when I was 12, and it was a dark fantasy story about a knight who was a murderous killing machine, and he went through the lands conquering and killing, and then he decided that he had a change of heart, fell in love with a girl, and decided to want to settle down, but his past kept catching up with him, and he knew that he would eventually have to face the Dark Lord that he used to serve in order to finally be free. So that's what that story was. But in hindsight, reading it again many years later, I didn't have the writing skill to convey that story, as fascinating as it may sound to some people out there.
Now, have you thought about going back to that and just reworking it with all your knowledge now?
Yeah, definitely. It's on the back. I have so many ideas, and all authors can probably relate to this, but I have so many ideas running through my head that sometimes I have to just codify them and save them for later.
and that's fair. My co-host Salem, he's definitely the writer of the two of us. When we do a lot of stuff, we were working on scripts for movies and stuff like that. We had a writing session, I think in December, and it was just a blast, just writing it out and kind of piecing together some of the short films that we want to do, and then our horror trilogy that we want to do as well. So it's fun. I'm not good with words, so that's why I have him. I've written stuff for magazines, so is he, and I just go, hey, can you read this over and make me sound not like a complete idiot? And he does that for me.
That's what a good editor
does
is
that
for.
Yeah. He does that for me. So really appreciate him for all that stuff. And I, like I said, reading the book Whisper in the Dark, you can tell that you have military and vet experience. Now with this, you said you started writing this back in the day. Now, was it always the intention to have that in-depth piece of the military aspect of this in your book, or is it something that just came later as you wrote this after you're serving?
Well, I'd be lying if I said I always when I was young, I used to read a lot of soldier fortune magazines.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if they still have them anymore. They in the 70s and 80s they were huge.
I don't know. It's a good question.
So we used to have those magazines, and I used to read about all the firearms and things in there, and that's usually where I got my knowledge from. And my father, of course, he was in the Marine Corps for 26 years, but it was very limited. So there was no way I could convey the amount of detail that I have now, because I have my own experience in the military. And that authenticity is just something that was implemented later. I think, sometimes it's you got to trust the journey of life, and that brought the my military career brought the knowledge that I needed to really bring the authenticity of military action to the Unholy Slaying Agency. Because sometimes my friends and I, when I served, if we see things on screen or we read things and it's about the military, but it's just so outrageous, it's like that would never happen. Like taking a cell phone call while you're deployed. Like
you're not gonna be able to hear anything on the call, right?
Yeah, right. The Humvees are loud, so I don't know if you'd be able to hear anything in them. But maybe if it was a non-combat guy, like maybe I don't know, it's like some support guy on a comfortable fob. But we were on a combat outpost, so we were living in refurbished Iraqi buildings. Thankfully, the Army engineers came in, hooked us up with electricity and running water by getting us tapped into the grid of the city once it was back up and running. But we didn't really live in much luxury. We had a little bit of luxury when we went to the FOB. We didn't have those types of luxuries where we could just make phone calls home. So in any ways, the enemy's always listening. So the enemy has sophisticated encryption devices and they can intercept our transmissions. So if you're not careful, if you don't have cryptographics, they can hear what you're talking about. So especially when you're dealing with sophisticated enemies like the Al Qaeda, the Jaish al-Mahdi. They're no joke. They're very sneaky. They're very well armed, and they're very tactical. So if you underestimate them and you end up dropping your guard, you can end up regretting it, especially if you let something that's vital slip. So there's things like that, especially also when a grenade blows up on television, there's usually a fiery mess and it's an inferno, and it's like, it's not what it looks like when it blows up. So then it explodes. It's just like a big puff. All the shrapnel flies out. It's a gray little cloud, and it dissipates real quickly.
Right. But it's not cinematic.
Yeah, it's not that's not exciting, right? It's very anticlimactic, honestly.
Yeah. But I said, I think that really shows though with your work. And Bill, from this scenario can test too, is he was in the Army and he was able to see all this stuff. Like I said, it really shows. So I like to think in my head that is always there meant to be, right?
Right.
So exactly. You can tell us a little about of the horror side. We don't talk about this before, but we talked about the Book of Enoch and Nephilisms and giants, stuff like that. So how did that come into the story then?
I am fascinated with the occult, and I'm a Christian, and I'm not one of those. I keep it to myself mostly. I'm not one of those people that tries to tell you got to do what I do. No, I'm a Christian. I'm an old school Christian. I look into things like that most modern churches don't talk about. Demons, fallen angels, and the Bible is a horrific book.
Mhm.
The Bible, when you actually read it and you're not being guided by a pastor who just wants you to focus on maybe the synoptic gospels. That's the synoptic gospels are beautiful, don't get me wrong, but when you start looking into the other stories, there's so many of them, you know, especially from the missing books, like you said, the book of Enoch, you start to see some horrific things in the Bible,
Yes.
terrifying things. I'm sorry, what were you saying, sir?
Oh, so that's yes.
Oh yeah, so there, I mean, there's demons,
Mhm.
and fallen angels that are like nightmarish, Lovecraftian beings. That's the best way I can describe them. I mean, some they're so bizarre when the way they're described. You have backwater cultists sacrificing virgins and babies. You have vampires, zombies, ghosts, you know, all sorts of horrible things, witches, evil, a lot of evil stuff. So it's the original horror book. There's a lot of terrifying things in there, and that's where a lot of my inspiration came from. Especially the book Enoch. I think it's quite frankly the most terrifying one. And if you believe and prescribe to the Bible as history, then it's very terrifying, because then you start to realize humanity was brought to the brink of extinction by a world filled with monsters. It's terrifying perspective, right? And it also explains a lot of things in the Bible too, like why did God flood the earth? Well, oh, he's just being mean. No, that's not really what happened. You know, so it really, I love delving into that type of stuff. It's a little controversial for some people. A lot of Christians, they don't prescribe to the book of Enoch. That's why I'm kind of considered a heretic. That guy's weird, you know, like he believes in the book of Enoch. But to me, it makes the darker elements that other Christians avoid tend to makes when you read it, it makes the rest of the Bible make sense.
Yeah.
So that's the reason why I really dwelled into it. But I've also had my own horrifying experiences with the occult. Okay, so I think I might have mentioned this one on the last show, but I'll say it again. I used to, before I start this, I used to be very secretive about this because I didn't want anyone to think I was crazy. But after hearing about so many people having their own run-ins, like I've started to tell my own story. But I was young. I was driving home from karate practice one night, and this was in North Carolina. This was during a really bad winter. Sometimes North Carolina's hit or miss. Sometimes the winters are weak, but sometimes they're insane. This one was an insane one. There was snow everywhere. It was inclement weather. We were driving home from karate practice, and we see a deer just running across the street. My father stops. We're in this van. It's called the Red Dragon. We stop, slide a little bit, wait. Deer passes. But then something else comes from the wilderness, and it's moving fast, like Jesse Owens fast, Olympic runner fast, fast, pumping legs. And it's this emaciated man in a tattered coat, except his lips are gone. There's like this black crusty stuff, and I can see his teeth being bared, lips completely gone. And his eyes were solid black, and his hair was disheveled, and I could see his rib cage. His body was naked underneath the jacket. I could see his rib cage, see everything, but he was so emaciated. And he looks and he howls at me and my dad, and he's loud as hell. That's actually the best way I can describe it. And we are shaken to the core. I'm like goosebumps, eyes wide, hair standing up. I am frozen in fear. And then it just hauls ass across the street. Thank God it just goes away and continues chasing the deer. I'm assuming that's what it did. I'm hoping that's what it did. And then my father just continues on his way, and he asked me, "Are you okay?" I said, yeah, I think I am. My dad's like, there are things out there in the world that hard to explain, but you know, you've got a taste of it, and I really didn't want you to learn this way, but yeah, now you know. So for a while that haunted me, and that really changed my life. I was a young boy. I was like maybe 8 years old when this happened. And I decided at that point I was going to try to figure out what the hell was out there.
Right.
And that's how I went down this rabbit hole that is my life.
Yeah. It's amazing that the things that you see and perceive, my closest story to anything was, I just remember, I don't know, I was probably 15 years old, driving back from my sister's along the expressway, and all of a sudden we see like 5 lights that look like, a triangle of UFOs, and we didn't, like, okay, and my entire family saw it. We go, this is weird. We're not seeing. We can't believe we're seeing this. It's not really moving, just kind of staying there. And we like on the ramp, and we're like, okay, we have to go back and see what that was. So my dad went back around, and it's probably only like 3 minutes, and it was gone.
Oh wow!
And I did research. I looked on, see if anyone else spotted it, and there's planes overhead all the time. I don't live that far away from Midway and O'Hare here in Chicago, and like we're used to planes. It was not a plane. It wasn't anything like for the Chicago Air Show or anything like that. We can't explain it to this day. We have no idea. And my sister's like, I can't believe we ever saw that. I don't tell anyone that story. I'm like, why not? So I don't believe it. So I'm like, was it UFO? Was not. I'm at that point in time, I was fully convinced it was UFO.
Nice.
And it just reminds me, because when Starlink lit up, it went over, you were able to see it as it orbited the Earth. My parents had zero idea that was happening. They just happened to look out one night and saw Starlink go past, and they immediately called me, like, "Oh man, I think we just saw it again." Like, no, that's Starlink. Fortunately, it's not the same thing, but it's a great story to get there. So, with this and everything that you're doing, with your, the USA, I know we talked about this before, but you've ever plans to turn this into, like, whether a comic or an animated TV show or even a movie series?
I would love for all of those to happen. And it's also a video game too. I thought about making it into that as well. I would love to get picked up. I think it has a lot of potential to be part of all those outlets.
Mm-hmm.
Um, especially as a television series that I can see it being like picked up by Amazon and done for a low budget compared to what I see them spend on other
Yeah.
shows. I think it could be very entertaining. There seems to be a void missing. We don't really have that supernatural show anymore, right? It's like
Mm-hmm.
Kolchak's over, X-Files is over, Supernatural's over, and the recent one I really enjoyed was Evil.
Mm-hmm.
That was really good. That was like Michael Coulter.
Yeah.
But now there's a void, and I'm hoping one day that someone takes note out there in Hollywood. If you're listening, Hollywood, Unholy Slang Agency would make an amazing television series. And hey, you have your what's it called? Military advisor or something
Yeah.
like that here. I'd be more than happy to serve in that capacity as well.
Now, would you want to be kind of like all the things, as James said? Would you have a multi-platform attack? Like, would you have the comic that ties into the show, or the comic that's like a precursor into the video game?
That would be amazing. Yeah, definitely. Comics are just so I love comics so much. I really do. I don't spend as much time reading them as I used to, but I think that it could really draw in a lot of people, especially because comics can tell. If you have a precursor comic, it can really expand the world more than what you get from just a video game or just from a movie.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that would be amazing. I would definitely, and I think the comic would allow us to touch on more ground for maybe people who don't necessarily like reading 250-page novels. So
That's fair. But what would your video game be? Would it be like first person shooter, or would you be a third person? Like, would you go more down the Resident Evil path, or more like Call of Duty path?
I think Call of Duty would probably be, well, I don't, I wouldn't, I like it to be first person, but I would think more first person, more in a blend of Call of Duty and maybe with the co-op capabilities of say like maybe like Halo.
Okay.
And four man or woman squads going in, kicking butt together. Likely it would be a cooperative game though. I don't really see too much deathmatch happening unless maybe you could have someone playing as the monsters. That would be interesting. Having someone play as the villains.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. I mean, I could definitely see it. Did you ever play the video game Nightmare Creatures back in the 90s?
I heard of it. I never played it.
It's think of it like Final Fight, but with old school creatures. So it's almost like Castlevania, but like more horror. Like the theme song, the soundtrack for number 2 was all done by Rob Zombie, if that tells you anything.
Oh, that's badass. Okay. I love some Rob Zombie.
Yeah. Yeah. So I can see it being both. And I can even, you can almost see it being an offshoot of X-Files as well, that the FBI then gives these case files to the USA.
It's actually what happens in the 3rd novel.
Oh.
Yeah, they end up handing it off because they don't know what to do with it.
There you go. Perfect. That's awesome. I like it. I hope everything happens for you. You know, with your work that you want to get done. Would you stay on as a creative and writer, or would you be willing just to sell the rights to it?
Well, I would like to be in an advisory capacity, but I understand that, like, I don't really. Screenwriting is a different animal than actually writing a novel, so I know that they're going to have to tweak things and do things a little different, and I don't understand that. So I don't think I could be completely serving in that capacity where I would be able to take over and write the screenplay. Not yet, at least. I've thought about going back to college and learning how to write for screenplays and things like that. But as of right now, I wouldn't be ready to fill those shoes. I would definitely have to hand it off to them and just serve as an advisor.
Right. Yeah. You know, I know people that have talked to Netflix about shows and pitches. Is the problem with Netflix is you essentially lose your rights to the property on their aspect, which kind of sucks. But you know, I think maybe if you talk to, like, hell, even Shudder, they need scripted TV shows.
I didn't think about that. Shudder, okay.
Yeah. I mean, they're making all these movies. Why not work with them or Screenbox and see if you can't make something happen? Make a pitch deck.
Hell yeah.
I like it. Love it all. All right, Guy. Well, we're approaching the time. Let's get into these roundup questions here. So this is a question I ask everyone. Let's see. We have 2 people have answered this question this way. 77 the other. You ready? Practical or CGI?
Practical.
Okay. You're with the majority of people. I completely agree.
CGI just doesn't, I see it and it just doesn't register with me. It looks like a video game to me. I'm just like, eh.
Yeah. It's funny. Like, so one of the guys who answers CGI does that for a living, so that makes sense. So, and the other one surprisingly was Bruce Flanch. He was a comedy guy. He was on Hollywood Squares back in the day, but yeah, definitely see practical all the way. And I would imagine for the show too, you'd want as practical as possible, right?
Yeah.
If you were to pitch it.
Oh yeah. If I would want it to be I mean, I understand that they're probably going to have to, hey, we can't buy a zombie dog. So we're just going to CGI it in there. Okay, I get it. Like, there's certain cuts that are going to have to be made, but yeah, I would definitely practical. I think it would be more cost effective too, because CGI just seems so expensive.
Yeah.
It seems so expensive. I think that if you went old school with, especially some of the effect, like some of the effects, like maybe when the rookie gets his finger bit off, they don't need CGI for that.
No, I agree. I think CGI has its place if it's practical for 90% of it, and then you enhance the rest with CGI.
Yeah, I think they should. What they should start focusing on is maybe a blend of the two. So like you said, but whatever the camera's focused on, just try to keep that practical.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I know. For actors in the field, it's much easier for them to work with practical stuff anyway. All right, so Guy, with all that being said, if you're able to write a story or even write for next IP entry in the franchise, what would it be? It doesn't have to be horror, but what would you like to write a story for?
For like another franchise?
Mm-hmm.
Ooh, okay. I would like to write for Amazon's Rings of Power series.
Okay.
They wanted to touch on a few on the past, and they ended up bastardizing Tolkien's world, for lack of a better term, and turning it into an abomination. I think that there is a chance to make an IP that people would accept, and I think there's still a way to turn it around, but you're going to have to stay genuine to Tolkien's original vision. And I would say you would have to start the Silmarillions and go from there. There's an amazing story. Horrible memory. Good guy. I took too many blows as a boxer and as a soldier. Too many blows to the head. Oh, good grief. I'm trying to think of his name. His the light of. Well, anyways, he's on a. Okay, I'll never forgive myself. I'm gonna come back to this later and just kick myself in the nuts. So there's the Arundel. I think it's Arundel.
Okay.
In his airship, and Arundel and his wife Elwing, and they take on they go on the airship with the Eagles, and they go to war with and Calagon the Black and his dragons, and I just thought it would be an amazing, that would just his quest and the final scene where they're battling in the air with the airship and the Eagles versus the dragons. That would be amazing. I think you would be able to touch on having a strong male and a strong female character in that regard, and just tell an awesome story and as long as you keep it genuine to Tolkien, the fans will come. I know I will. A lot of people just want you to stay true to the source material. People are, I think you can only subvert expectations so much. When they're familiar with something and you subvert it on purpose, it causes more agitation than surprise. And there needs to be a fine balance to that. I think too many writers nowadays subvert expectations without reason. So they can accuse me of doing it as well. But there's usually a reason why I do things. So you'll see when you reach the end of this novel, there's a reason why I do things, and it's to put the reader inside the shoes of what it feels like to be a soldier. So one of the things I do is some people, you killed too many characters. Well, and you got me attached to this character and you killed him. You made me think he was the main character. Well, that's what it's like being a soldier. You might be with your friend 1 second and you get hit with an IED, and when you come to, he's gone. And or he gets hit with a sniper and he's gone in that instant, and there was no chance to say goodbye. There was no epic farewell. He's just gone in the blink of an eye.
Yeah.
So there's a reason. So to make a long story short, there has to be a reason why you do certain things, and I think that a lot of writers in Hollywood are missing that. And they could learn a few things from the indie authors.
Yeah, I agree. I support indie all the way. I love indie creators, really do. So, Guy, any advice for people getting into the field of writing and writing novels?
I would have to say, don't quit. Don't quit. It can be a daunting task. Don't quit, and don't be hard on yourself. I met a lot of young writers who were aspiring to be authors, and they put very lofty goals on their plate, and they're too hard on themselves. Writing a novel is hard. It is hard. And writing the first one is always the hardest. So that's my advice, is just enjoy the process, enjoy the journey. Don't be hard on yourself. Have fun with it. And another thing, to stay true to your voice. So a lot of, this is something that might be a little controversial, but a lot of racism still exists in the mainstream literary community. So this is something I spoke about in my interview with a magazine and recently, and damn, my horrible memory, but there's a lot of pitfalls out there for people. So the mainstream wants to control your voice. Don't be afraid to go indie. If you really believe in your work and you really love what you do, don't be afraid to go indie, because if you're independent, guess what? No one controls you.
Mm-hmm.
You have your own voice. You can tell your own story, and you can tell however you want.
Love it. Love it. Now, we do have a segment where we pick a random horror trivia card from our deck of cards here. We ask our guests, if you get it right, fantastic. If you don't get it right, not a big deal. It's all right. But we said just the first stack of the card.
I feel the
ready?
pressure.
Are you ready?
Yes, sir. Ready.
All right. How does the flesh-eating disease spread in the 2002 film Cabin Fever?
Oh my God, that's one of my favorite movies too. Pancakes. Oh my God. Carl's gonna kill me. I don't remember. Pass.
Oh, Carl, let us know.
Water.
Yep. Oh yeah, we just did the Book of Eli Roth, as we called it, episode of our other podcast that we do last week. So just rewatched it for the I don't know how many dozens time. So
it's an amazing movie. When I was in the service, we used to play that movie. So that's why I feel so ashamed. We used to play that movie on my first tour all the time. It was such a good movie.
Absolutely.
I love that movie.
All right, Guy, before we go, where can people find you, follow you, learn everything about you, and pick up your books that you have?
Well, you can follow me on Instagram. That's my main platform for my work. I'm also on Facebook. My door is always open if anyone wants to talk about writing or horror or the occult, anything like that. I don't talk about the military too much, except for there was a few people who were thinking about joining, so I told them what to expect. But check me out at Guy Quintero on Instagram. That's my main platform. I'm also on Discord as well. Same thing. The Demented Gentleman is a channel. And you guys can also find me at www.guyquintero.com. And that also has a tree to access all of my media there. So, yeah.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Guy, for coming on tonight. It was an absolute blast and pleasure having you on. And for all the new people here in the chat, make sure to follow us as well and all social media at Pod Out at Night. We do podcasts weekly where we review horror movies. We do this show every Wednesday, Conversation in the Void, and we do gaming of horror games and retro games over on Twitch as well. So thank you, Guy, again. We'll see you next time. Don't get lost in the void. Good night.